The text from my sister arrived 10 minutes before the board meeting. Do not show up. You already embarrassed yourself enough. When I walked into my grandmother's historic inn anyway, every face turned white. My mother dropped her champagne glass. My sister stood beside the lawyer wearing the blazer she stole from my closet the week she stole my life. Then the lawyer cleared his throat and said the one thing none of them planned for. The deed had not gone to Blood's favorite daughter. It had gone to me. Before I tell you how my own family tried to bury me while I was still alive, tell me where you are watching from. If betrayal stories and hard-earned justice keep you locked in like this video, subscribe. And stay with me because what happened inside that inn did not destroy one lie. It exposed an entire family system built on it. My name is Natalie Brooks, and until that morning, I had spent almost 5 years being treated like the mistake nobody in my family wanted to admit out loud. My grandmother Evelyn owned a restored coastal inn in Savannah, Georgia. A beautiful old property with wide porches, wrought iron balconies, and a reputation for hosting society weddings, charity dinners, and political fundraisers. Tourists loved the place because it looked warm and welcoming. Locals respected it because Evelyn built it from nothing after my grandfather died young. Inside our family, though, the inn was never just a business. It was power. It was validation. It was the throne everyone pretended not to fight over while circling it like starving animals. I grew up believing that hard work mattered there. My grandmother taught me how to greet guests, how to calm brides having meltdowns, how to read supply invoices, how to make a room feel expensive without wasting money. By the time I was in high school, I could flip a banquet hall between events faster than most adults on staff. I handled booking software in college, updated the website, increased direct reservations, and built vendor relationships that brought in real revenue. My younger sister Vanessa had none of that discipline. She had charisma, polished hair, a smile that made strangers forgive things they had not even seen yet, and a talent for making other people's work look like her vision. My mother adored her. My aunt praised her. My grandmother for a long time saw through her. But age softens some people in the worst possible ways, especially when one granddaughter performs sweetness in person while the other is always somewhere in the back office fixing the damage. After my father died, the balance in the family changed. He had been the only one who called out my mother's favoritism. He used to tell me plain and steady, "They reward performance when Vanessa does it. They call it attitude when you do." After he was gone, nobody translated reality for me anymore. I was left alone inside a system designed to make me doubt my own eyes. At first, the disrespect came in small doses. Vanessa started showing up late to event walkthroughs and blaming me for the missing details. My mother Lorraine began introducing Vanessa to vendors as the future of the property, even though I was the operations manager, and Vanessa did not even understand the contract terms she was signing. When guests complimented a successful wedding weekend, Vanessa accepted every bit of praise. When there were complaints, somehow those always landed in my inbox. Then came Daniel. Daniel was a real estate attorney from Atlanta, charming in that polished way men learn when they know being handsome has opened doors for them. He met Vanessa at a fundraiser, but within months he was always around the inn, always talking to my grandmother, always smiling at my mother, like he already belonged in the family. I did not trust him. He asked too many questions about ownership structure, trust distributions, insurance, and debt. Not normal guest questions. Not even normal future son-in-law questions. Asset questions. When I raised concerns, my mother laughed in my face. "Natalie, not everything is a conspiracy. Some people actually know how to think bigger than bookkeeping." That was her favorite method. Belittle first, reframe my accuracy as bitterness, then hand the spotlight back to Vanessa. It got worse after my grandmother had a minor stroke. She recovered enough to stay sharp in private conversations, but she grew tired easily, and that was all my mother and sister needed. They moved meetings around her. They brought papers to her room so she would not have to strain herself. They started using phrases like succession planning and estate protection. Every time I asked for copies, I was told I was overstepping. One Friday afternoon, I found an accounts payable folder in Vanessa's unlocked office. I was looking for linen invoices for an upcoming wedding, but what I found stopped me cold. There were duplicate vendor payments with slightly altered invoice numbers. Landscaping had been paid twice in the same month. A furniture vendor had charged for replacement pieces that were never delivered. A consulting firm I had never heard of had received recurring payments from the inn for brand repositioning strategy. The address on the invoice matched a mailbox rental center in Atlanta. I took photos. That night I stayed late and pulled digital records from the accounting system. The consulting firm had received money for almost 11 months. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers. The total made me sit back in my chair and stare at the screen. It was enough to cover a luxury car, or a down payment, or legal fees for some larger move already in motion. The next layer was even uglier. Guest damage deposits were being kept longer than policy allowed and then quietly reclassified. Refund reserves were manipulated at the end of each quarter to make cash flow appear stronger than it was. Maintenance expenditures had been deferred on paper, but the funds had still left the operating account. There were handwritten authorizations scanned into the system with my grandmother's initials, except the initials were wrong. Close enough to fool outsiders. Wrong enough for anyone in the family to notice. I printed everything I could. The next morning, I brought it to my mother privately. I was still naive enough to think that if I showed her hard evidence, she would protect the inn over Vanessa. She did not even look embarrassed. She looked annoyed. You went into files that were not yours. That money is missing. It is called restructuring. That is not restructuring, that is falsification. Her mouth tightened. You always do this. You always take one thing and turn it into an accusation because you cannot handle the fact that your sister is trusted with more. Trusted with more. I remember that phrase because it told me everything. It was not about facts. It was about loyalty to the favored child. I went to Vanessa next. I should not have, but I was furious. She was in the bridal suite reviewing floral samples as if she had not been siphoning money out of the business our grandmother spent 40 years building. She smiled when she saw the folder in my hand. You really went digging. So it is true. Be careful with your tone. You forged Grandma's initials. Vanessa set down the sample book slowly like she was the calm one and I was the unstable one. You do not understand the full picture. Then explain it. Daniel is helping us protect the property. By draining it. By moving assets before they can be divided stupidly. That word hung there, divided. I felt the room tilt. You're already moving assets. She did not answer directly. She did not need to. I pushed harder. What did you do? She leaned closer, lowering her voice. I did what somebody had to do. Grandma cannot run this forever. Mother cannot fight every battle alone. And you are good at working, Natalie. That does not make you leadership. Contempt has a sound when it comes from family. It lands more intimately than shouting. Her voice was soft, dismissive, almost pitying, as if I were a useful employee who had confused herself with an heir. I went straight to my grandmother's room, but my mother intercepted me in the hallway and blocked the door. She is resting. She needs to know what Vanessa is doing. My mother's face hardened into something old and cold. Do not create stress for that woman just because you are jealous. Jealous. There it was again. Their favorite weapon. If I objected to corruption, I was jealous. If I questioned documents, I was dramatic. If I asked for transparency, I was divisive. I stepped around her and entered anyway. My grandmother was awake, reading in bed. She looked smaller than I was used to, but her eyes were still sharp. I handed her the folder. She read for nearly 10 minutes without speaking. The silence in that room was worse than any screaming match downstairs. Finally, she looked up at me. Who else has seen this? Mother, Vanessa. And Daniel, I think he is part of it. She closed the folder carefully. Leave this with me. I wanted certainty. I wanted outrage. I wanted her to say I know exactly what to do. Instead, she only said, do not tell anyone else yet. That answer tormented me for weeks. During that time, the disrespect intensified, as if Vanessa knew she was close to locking everything down. My office access to certain financial folders was revoked. My title was changed on internal documents from operations manager to guest services coordinator without notice. I was excluded from planning meetings. Vendors I had worked with for years suddenly told me they had been instructed to clear all approvals through Vanessa. Then Daniel made his move. At a family dinner disguised as a celebration for my grandmother's recovery, He announced that he and Vanessa were engaged. Everyone clapped. My mother cried. My aunt toasted the future of the Brooks legacy. I sat there feeling like I was watching thieves congratulate each other in church. After dessert, Daniel pulled me aside onto the back veranda. "You should stop making things difficult," he said. That was the first time he dropped the charming act with me. "You are stealing from my grandmother." His expression barely changed. "Nobody is stealing. We are consolidating. There is a difference. You forged records." He gave a little smile. "Be very careful accusing an attorney of fraud. I have copies. Copies can disappear, so can reputations." There was a threat buried in that sentence, smooth and clean. The kind of threat that comes from someone who believes institutions belong to him. The next week, I was called into a meeting with Human Resources, though the inn did not even have a real Human Resources department. It was my mother, Vanessa Daniel, and an outside consultant they had hired for appearances. They accused me of creating a hostile work environment, mishandling vendor communication, and improperly accessing confidential records. I laughed when I heard it because the alternative was breaking down. "You are accusing me of misconduct because I found yours." My mother folded her hands like she was pained by my behavior. "Natalie, this is exactly what we mean. Every conversation becomes a scene." I was placed on temporary leave pending review. Temporary leave from the business I had helped keep alive through hurricane season staffing shortages and 2 years of near collapse after the pandemic. That night, I packed the framed photo of my father from my desk before they could remove it for me. Vanessa watched from the doorway, her engagement ring flashing in the light. "You could have had a place here," she said. I turned to look at her fully. "No, I could have had a cage here." For the first time, her smile faltered. 3 days later, my grandmother called me from a private number I did not recognize. Her voice was thin but very clear. "Natalie, I need you to listen carefully. Do not talk to your mother. Do not talk to Vanessa. And whatever happens next, do not disappear." My whole body went cold. "Grandma, what happened?" She took a shaky breath. "I trusted the wrong people inside my own house." Then the line cut out. The next morning, I learned from a staff group chat that my grandmother had been moved to a private care facility for rest and monitoring. Nobody had told me where. Nobody answered my calls. And by noon, an internal email announced that Vanessa had been appointed acting executive director of the inn while ownership matters were being finalized. That was when I understood this was not sloppy greed anymore. It was a seizure. They were not just stealing revenue. They were trying to erase me before the transfer became visible. So I did the only thing left to do. I stopped begging my family to act like family, and I started building a case. The first person I called was not a lawyer. It was Tessa, the longtime head housekeeper, who had worked at the inn since before I was born. People like my mother and sister always overlooked women like Tessa. They treated her like furniture that spoke when needed. That was their mistake. Tessa knew which rooms had private meetings, which envelopes arrived without return addresses, which guests stayed too long and asked too many questions. She also knew who paid in cash, who got comped without documentation, and who had been told to keep quiet. When I told her I thought Vanessa and Daniel were moving money and preparing an ownership grab, Tessa did not sound surprised. "I wondered when you would say it out loud," she told me. That sentence alone nearly broke me, because it meant the rot had been visible. Visible enough that staff could sense it while I was still trying to make my mother choose truth over favoritism. Tessa agreed to meet me off property at a diner outside the historic district. She arrived with a grocery tote bag filled with copies of scheduling logs, handwritten instructions from my mother, and notes she had kept after being asked to assign certain rooms for private family business. She slid the papers across the table one by one, like she was laying out evidence at a trial. "Your sister had us empty the Magnolia Suite twice for those late meetings with the lawyer," she said. "No guest booking, no event booking, just family." The dates matched unusual transfers from the inn account. Then Tessa handed me something even better, copies of surveillance stills she had printed from the security office before the footage retention cycle erased them. Daniel was shown entering the administrative office after midnight on 2 separate occasions, on days when no late event was scheduled. Vanessa was with him once. My mother was with him the second time. They had no legitimate reason to be in that office after hours. I left that diner with my hands shaking. Next, I contacted Owen Mercer, a forensic accountant my father had used years earlier during a dispute involving an investment property. Owen was blunt, expensive, and allergic to family drama, which made him exactly the kind of person I needed. I sent him the photos, the duplicate invoices, the account exports, and the notes from Tessa. He called me that same night. "This is not sloppy," he said. "This is patterned." What does that mean? It means someone knew how to keep each theft small enough to avoid immediate internal panic while building toward a larger legal argument. He walked me through it piece by piece. The fraudulent consulting payments could create justification for strategic restructuring. The manipulated reserves made the business appear unstable in selective reports and healthy in others depending on the audience. Delayed maintenance entries lowered apparent operating efficiency. If they were trying to persuade an elderly owner that one heir was incapable of management while another was saving the property, the paperwork supported the story. In other words, they were manufacturing incompetence around me while manufacturing necessity around Vanessa. Owen also found something I had missed. A newly formed holding company had begun appearing in cross-referenced vendor payment trails. It was tied to a mailing address in Atlanta and a registered agent linked to Daniel's firm. Not directly enough for a courtroom win yet, but close enough to show intent. I asked him the question that had been circling in my head for weeks. Can they actually take the in? If your grandmother signed documents under pressure, confusion, or false pretenses, they can try. Whether they keep it is another matter. Try. That word felt like a knife. Because families do not usually need certainty before they betray you. They only need an opening. I spent the next 2 weeks doing what my family had always mocked me for being good at. I organized. I cross-checked. I built timelines. I interviewed former employees who had quietly resigned after Vanessa took a larger role. One event coordinator told me she had been ordered to backdate invoices. A maintenance supervisor admitted he was told not to complete repairs that had already been billed. A front desk associate said Vanessa instructed staff to route all mail marked legal or confidential directly to her office, bypassing standard intake procedures. Every story connected, every document tightened the pattern. But evidence alone was not enough. I needed exposure, not emotional confrontation, not another closed room where my mother could call me unstable and my sister could smirk. I needed a formal moment they could not control. That opportunity came from the very thing Vanessa loved most: visibility. Each fall, the Inn hosted the Brooks Legacy Gala, a charity event tied to my grandmother's social standing and the family name. Business leaders, city council members, donors, local press, preservation board members, and half the old money class in Savannah attended. Vanessa planned to use this year's gala to present herself as the elegant new face of the property, while my grandmother remained mysteriously absent. It was perfect, because if they wanted legitimacy in public, I was going to force the truth into that same room. There was one problem. I had already been pushed out internally. I had no access badge, no speaking slot, no authority on paper that anyone present would recognize. Then Owen called with news that shifted the ground beneath everything. He had traced a trust amendment filed months earlier through a private estate registry process. The filing itself was not public in full, but the linked notice made one fact unmistakable: my grandmother had not transferred ownership to Vanessa. She had moved controlling interest into a protected succession structure pending activation. And the activation clause appeared tied to certified findings of misconduct or coercion by named family stakeholders. My grandmother had known. Maybe not everything, maybe not right away, but enough. I sat in my apartment, staring at the summary Owen sent over, tears blurring the page. For weeks, I had felt abandoned by the one person I thought might still protect the truth. Now I could see that she had been playing a quieter game under pressure from people living inside her home. Still, it was incomplete. We had proof of manipulation. We had proof of suspicious transfers. We had proof that Vanessa and Daniel were positioning themselves. But I still needed the missing bridge between internal fraud and legal exposure. That bridge arrived through a source I never expected: my cousin Elise. Elise and I were never especially close, because my mother kept most of the extended family divided into shifting camps. But Elise sent me a single message after hearing rumors I had spiraled and been removed from the inn. I do not believe their version. Call me. We met in her parked car outside a grocery store because she did not want anyone tracking us through the family grapevine. Elise looked sick before she even started talking. She told me she had been helping my aunt sort donation records after one of the family charity events. During that process, she found copies of signature pages attached to incomplete packets. One included my grandmother's signature on a transfer authorization referencing emergency restructuring powers. Another page in a separate folder used the same signature placement but attached it to a different body document when photocopied. Elise had noticed because our grandmother always underlined her middle initial and one page cut the underline in half. They were reusing signature pages, she whispered. That was it. That was the missing bridge. Forgery was one thing. Signature page substitution inside asset documents was another level of deliberate fraud, the kind that turned suspicious family behavior into criminal exposure. Elise gave me scans she had secretly made before returning the originals. I sent them to Owen, who almost immediately looped in a litigation attorney named Rebecca Sloan, a woman with a reputation for dismantling fraud cases without theatrics. Rebecca reviewed everything and told me what I needed to hear. You have enough to force a halt if we move carefully, but if you want them exposed in a way they cannot spin, do it where their own narrative is strongest. The gala. Rebecca helped draft a formal notice of disputed authority and asset tampering. Owen prepared a summary of financial inconsistencies. Tessa agreed to provide a witness declaration. Elise prepared a statement regarding the substituted signature pages. We also tracked down the physician who evaluated my grandmother after her stroke. He could not discuss private medical details beyond legal limits, but he confirmed something critical through counsel. During the period, certain restructuring documents were allegedly explained to her. She was under medication that could impair sustained comprehension. Pressure, manipulation, document tampering, false financial narratives. It was all converging. The night of the gala, I stood outside the inn in a navy dress I had not worn since my father's memorial. That was deliberate. He was the one person who would have wanted me to walk in calm, prepared, and impossible to dismiss. My hands were cold, but my mind was clear in a way it had not been for months. Inside the ballroom glowed with chandeliers and polished silver. Vanessa was on stage thanking guests for supporting continuity during a season of family transition. My mother sat near the front table, elegant and composed, playing loyal daughter and devoted steward. Daniel moved through the crowd, shaking hands like a man who thought the future had already signed itself over to him. Then Rebecca gave me a nod. We had timed everything, so the formal service team, the press stringer covering local philanthropy, and the board advisors were all in the room. Not because I wanted spectacle for its own sake. Because private lies survive in silence. Public lies collapse under witnesses. I walked forward just as Vanessa invited everyone to raise a glass to the next chapter of Brooke's hospitality. The microphone squealed when I took it from the stand. At first there was only confusion. Then recognition rippled across the room. My mother stood. Vanessa's smile froze. Daniel turned toward Rebecca and immediately understood he was looking at counsel, not a random guest. Before anyone toasts the next chapter, I said, and my own voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. You deserve to know that this transition has been built on fraud. The room went dead still. Vanessa recovered first. Of course she did. Natalie, this is not the place. It became the place when you used this event to legitimize theft. My mother hissed my name like I was a child making a scene at church. Daniel stepped forward, but Rebecca intercepted him and handed over the notice packet in full view of the nearest table. I did not rush. I laid it out piece by piece. I explained the duplicate vendor payments, the fabricated consulting invoices, the manipulated reserve reports, the rerouted legal correspondence, the after-hours office access, and the substituted signature pages. I named no accusation I could not support. That was important. I had spent too many months being painted as emotional. I was not giving them that opening again. When I mentioned my grandmother's impaired condition during key document periods, an audible murmur spread across the room. Vanessa tried to laugh. This is insane. Elise stood from the back and said clearly enough for half the ballroom to hear I saw the signature substitutions myself. Then Tessa spoke up near the service entrance. And I saw who used the offices after midnight. My mother looked like she might faint. Not from guilt, I think, from the terror of losing control in public. Daniel, however, made the mistake that finished the first half of his own downfall. He reached for the packet in Rebecca's hand, skimmed the first pages, and snapped, "These were not authorized for release. Not this is false. Not you are lying." These were not authorized for release. I saw the shift happen in real time across the faces in that room. Board members, donors, city people, wealthy regulars. Once he framed the issue as unauthorized exposure rather than false accusation, he told them exactly what kind of man he was. Rebecca spoke then, calm as winter. Council will be seeking injunctive relief tonight. Any attempt to transfer, encumber, or represent authority over the property after receipt of notice will carry personal liability. Vanessa turned on my mother in a flash of panic, which was the first crack in their perfect alliance. You said she had nothing. And there it was. Not grief, not confusion, not innocence. Fear. I looked at my family, really looked at them, and realized none of them seemed shocked by the facts themselves. Only by the failure of their timing. For years they had counted on my silence, my self-doubt, my hope that somebody would finally love me enough to tell the truth before I had to drag it into the light myself. That hope died in this ballroom. Good, because in its place something stronger finally stood up. And just as security donors and legal counsel began converging around the stage, the ballroom doors opened again. Every head turned. My grandmother had arrived. My grandmother did not walk in like a fragile woman recovering from illness. She walked in like a verdict. The room shifted around her presence. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses hovered halfway to lips. Even the staff straightened instinctively as if the building itself recognized who truly owned it. She wore a simple cream coat, her silver hair pinned neatly back, her posture upright despite everything they had tried to do to her. But it was her eyes that silenced the room, clear, focused, watching everything. Vanessa took a step back before she even realized she had moved. "Grandma," she said, voice thin, "you should not be here." My grandmother did not answer her. She walked directly toward me. For a moment I felt like I was 10 years old again, waiting to see if I had done something right, or something unforgivable. That instinct never really leaves you no matter how much you grow. She stopped in front of me and took my hand. "You did not disappear," she said quietly. "I told you I would not." Her grip tightened slightly, then she turned toward the room. "Then let us finish what they started." That was the moment everything escalated beyond a family argument. This was no longer about exposing wrongdoing. It was about reclaiming control in front of witnesses who could not pretend they had not seen it. Rebecca stepped forward, coordinating quickly with two additional attorneys who had arrived with my grandmother. Owen positioned himself near the side tables, already speaking with one of the board members. Tessa and Elise moved closer to me, no longer just quiet supporters, but visible parts of something forming. An alliance, not emotional, not reactive, structured. My grandmother requested the microphone, and this time no one dared refuse. "I have heard enough tonight to know that what I suspected is worse than I feared," she said. "But I will not rely on suspicion. I will rely on facts." She nodded toward Rebecca. Rebecca outlined the immediate legal steps already in motion. Temporary injunction to freeze asset transfers. Petition to audit all financial activity over the past period. Formal challenge to any authority claimed under disputed documentation. Notice to any third-party entities connected to the holding structure Daniel had quietly built. Each sentence tightened the air. Vanessa tried to interrupt twice. My mother once. Daniel attempted to reassert control, but the presence of external counsel and witnesses stripped his confidence down to something sharper and more desperate. Still, escalation is never clean. It fractures people. My aunt, who had supported my mother for years, suddenly began crying at the front table. "We did not know it was this bad," she said, though nobody had asked her. That was the first ripple. Others followed. Quiet distancing, subtle shifts. People stepping away from Vanessa as if proximity itself could stain them. But alliances are not built only from those who leave. They are also built from those who step forward. One of the longtime vendors approached Owen directly, offering to provide independent records. A board advisor requested copies of the evidence packet. Even one of the donors, a man who rarely spoke at events, said out loud, "If there has been misrepresentation tied to this property, we need full transparency before any continued support." Vanessa heard that. That was when her composure cracked fully for the first time. "You are all overreacting," she said sharply. "This is internal family restructuring. Natalie has always been unstable when she feels overlooked." There it was again, the narrative they had relied on, only this time it did not land the same way. Because now there were documents, witnesses, patterns. and my grandmother standing in the same room, not hidden behind closed doors or controlled conversations. My grandmother turned to Vanessa slowly. "Say that again," she said. Vanessa hesitated, not because she did not believe it, because she realized the room no longer did. That hesitation spoke louder than any defense. Daniel stepped in, trying to regain ground. "We should move this into private discussion. This is not appropriate for public interpretation." Rebecca answered him immediately. "Fraud affecting a business entity with public-facing operations becomes appropriate the moment it intersects with external stakeholders." Daniel's jaw tightened. He was losing control of the environment, and men like him are never more dangerous than when they realize influence is slipping. That was when he pivoted. Not toward me, toward my grandmother. "You signed those documents," he said. "You authorized restructuring." My grandmother did not raise her voice. "I signed what I was told were preliminary protections," she replied. "Not transfers, not authority consolidation, and certainly not anything that removes oversight." "That is your interpretation." "No," she said, looking directly at him. "Now that is your misrepresentation." Silence again. Heavy, pressurized. Then she added, "And I will say this clearly, so there is no confusion left to manipulate. Until a full review is complete, no one in this room has authority to act on behalf of this property without my explicit confirmation." That statement did more than assert control. It froze the game. But suspense does not come from stillness alone. It comes from what might break next. And something did. As the legal teams began coordinating immediate next steps, my phone buzzed in my hand. A message from an unknown number. "You think you are winning? Check the secondary accounts." I stared at the screen. Secondary accounts. I showed it to Owen. His expression changed in a way I had not seen yet. Not fear, not surprise. "Calculation. We need to verify this immediately," he said quietly. "Verify what?" He did not answer right away, because he already understood the implication. If there were additional accounts beyond what we had uncovered, then this was larger than we thought. Larger theft, or a contingency plan, or both. That message introduced a new layer of uncertainty right when momentum was on our side. Suspense tightened again, because victories built on incomplete information can collapse faster than lies. My grandmother noticed the shift in my face. "What is it?" I showed her the message. She read it once, then handed the phone back without reacting outwardly. Then we do not assume we have seen everything she said. We proceed like we have not. That was leadership, not denial, not panic. Adjustment. The night did not end with resolution. It ended with lines drawn, legal processes triggered, alliances forming, and one dangerous question hanging in the air. What had we not found yet? Because somewhere, someone still believed they could turn this back around. And they were about to try. Betrayal does not always come from the people you expect. Sometimes it comes from the ones who stood closest when everything started to fall apart. The next morning began with momentum. Rebecca filed for emergency injunctions before sunrise. Owen began tracing what he now called shadow pathways, following irregular transaction patterns that did not match the primary accounts we had already flagged. Tessa coordinated quietly with staff willing to speak if protected. Elise remained in contact with me, updating anything she overheard from the extended family trying to rewrite what happened at the gala. For the first time in months, I felt something dangerous. Hope. That was my mistake. Because hope can make you overlook movement that does not feel like a threat yet. Owen called me mid-morning. "I found them. The secondary accounts." "Yes. Layered through vendor intermediaries. It is more aggressive than we thought." "How bad?" He paused. "Bad enough that if it is proven intentional, this stops being just civil exposure. Criminal." He did not say the word, but I heard it anyway. "Can you tie it directly to Daniel?" "Not yet, but the structure is consistent with someone who knows how to create distance between origin and destination. So we need more. We need something undeniable." That word mattered. Undeniable. Because everything we had so far could still be spun by someone skilled enough. Then Owen said something else. "I am going to need help accessing one restricted archive." "What kind of help?" "Internal. Someone with clearance still intact." I did not like that immediately. Who? I was thinking Elise. My stomach tightened. Elise had already taken a risk helping me. Asking her to go further meant exposing her directly if anything went wrong. But we needed that data. "I will talk to her," I said. That afternoon I met Elise again. She listened carefully, hands wrapped around a paper coffee cup she had not touched. "If I do this," she said, "there is no stepping back." "I know. And if they find out, they will try to turn everything on you." She nodded slowly. Then she said, "Okay." That should have felt like relief. Instead, something in me hesitated. A flicker. Small, easy to ignore. I ignored it. That was my second mistake. By evening, Elise had accessed the archive Owen needed. She sent over internal transfer logs tied to vendor clearing accounts. Owen reviewed them immediately. Then he called me again. His voice was different this time. Tight. Natalie, something is wrong. What do you mean? These logs. They do not match the structure I traced this morning. My chest tightened. Explain. It is like they were altered recently. That is not possible. She just pulled them. I am telling you the pattern is inconsistent. Either someone manipulated the archive before she accessed it, or he did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. Or Elise had not given us what she said she did. I felt something cold settle in my chest. No, I said immediately, she would not. I am not making accusations, Owen replied carefully. I am telling you the data does not align. That was the moment the ground shifted under me again. Because betrayal inside a system is one thing. Betrayal inside your alliance is something else entirely. I called Elise. No answer. I texted. No response. I drove to her apartment. Lights on. Car outside. But she did not open the door. I stood there for nearly 10 minutes knocking, calling her name, feeling that flicker from earlier grow into something undeniable. Finally, my phone buzzed. A message. From Elise. I am sorry, you should have walked away when you had the chance. I stared at it, unable to process for a full second. Then another message came. From Vanessa. Did you really think you were the only one who could build a case? My breath caught. This was not coincidence. This was coordination. I called Owen immediately. They know. How? Elise. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, that explains the altered logs. I felt the weight of it hit all at once. Every conversation, every risk, every piece of trust. Used. You need to assume everything you shared through her is compromised. Owen continued. Every step you planned based on that access is exposed. Temporary defeat, not emotional. Strategic. And dangerous. Because now they knew how we were building the case, which meant they could counter it. Erase. Redirect. Attack. I slid down against the hallway wall outside Elise's apartment, my hands shaking for the first time since the gala. It was not just anger. It was exhaustion. How many layers did this go? How many times did I have to rebuild from the ground up because someone inside the circle chose themselves over truth? Then my phone rang again. Unknown number, I answered. Daniel's voice came through smooth as ever. You are persistent, he said. I did not respond. But persistence without leverage is just noise. You are running out of time. A soft laugh. No, you are. What did you promise her? Enough. I closed my eyes briefly. This was the part people do not talk about in stories like this. The moment when everything you built starts collapsing at once. The moment when you realize winning is not just about being right. It is about surviving long enough to prove it. You should have taken the leave and stayed quiet, Daniel continued. You might have kept some dignity. I am not done. You are closer than you think. Then the line went dead. I sat there in that hallway staring at nothing, feeling the full weight of temporary defeat settle over me. The alliance was fractured. Critical evidence was compromised. The people I was fighting had adjusted faster than I expected. And for the first time since I walked into that ballroom, I did not know what the next move was. But one thing was clear. This was not over. Not even close. Because if they thought breaking one piece of my alliance would end this, they still did not understand me at all. I did not sleep that night. Not because of fear, because of clarity. Betrayal strips things down fast. It removes illusion, cuts through hesitation, and forces you to see patterns without emotional interference. By the time the sun came up, I understood something I had been avoiding. I had been reacting. Even at my strongest moments, I was still responding to moves they made first. That had to end. If I wanted to win, I needed something they could not predict, could not manipulate, and could not erase. Undeniable. Not pulled from systems they controlled. Not accessed through people they could turn. Something original. Something they had already forgotten existed. That was when I thought of him. Marcus Hale. He had been the inn's financial controller years ago before my father passed. Quiet, precise, almost invisible to my mother because he never played into her social hierarchy. But my father trusted him completely. When Marcus left, it was sudden. No explanation, just gone. At the time, I assumed better opportunity. Now I question that. I found an old email thread buried in archived correspondence. A personal contact address. I sent a message with no expectation of response. If you remember my father, I need your help. He replied within 2 hours. I wondered how long it would take before this surfaced. My pulse quickened. We spoke that afternoon. Marcus did not waste time with sympathy. He went straight to structure. I left because I was asked to approve something I would not sign, he said. What was it? A layered authorization format. It allowed selective attachment of signature pages to different financial directives. Legal gray zone if used correctly. Criminal if abused. My stomach dropped. Elise found something like that. I am not surprised. Do you have proof? There was a pause. Yes. One word. Everything shifted. Marcus explained that before leaving, he had quietly retained copies of internal templates and early drafts tied to that system because he did not trust the direction things were going. He never used them, never reported them, but he kept them. Why keep it all this time, I asked. Because your father told me once that if something ever felt wrong, I should document it even if I could not act yet. That hit deeper than I expected, because my father had seen it coming before any of us. Marcus agreed to meet in person. When he handed me the file, it felt heavier than paper should. Inside were original drafts, email exchanges, and structural outlines showing exactly how signature page substitution could be executed without immediate detection. Not speculation. Design. And embedded within those documents were early discussions involving Daniel's firm. This was it, the missing link between concept and execution, not just what happened, how it was planned. I sent everything to Rebecca and Owen. Their response was immediate. This changes the case, Rebecca said. This is intent. This is premeditation. Owen added, and it aligns with the patterns we already traced. Perfectly. For the first time since Elise's betrayal, the ground felt stable again. But we still needed one final piece. Connection to present action. Marcus provided that too. Before leaving the inn years ago, he had set up an independent audit trigger within a dormant reporting structure. It was never activated publicly, but it quietly logged discrepancies tied to specific authorization patterns. It only activates under certain conditions, he explained. Like what? Like repeated use of signature page substitutions across financial actions. Has it triggered? He looked at me. It has now. That was the moment I knew. We had them, not just circumstantial, not just witness-based. System recorded, time-stamped, pattern verified, undeniable. Rebecca moved fast. Emergency filings were updated, expanded, strengthened. The new evidence forced escalation from civil dispute into potential criminal investigation territory. Third-party auditors were notified. Regulatory oversight bodies flagged. The legal pressure multiplied overnight. And then the final shift. Marcus said, "There is one more thing." I braced myself. I was listed as a silent contingency contact in your grandmother's succession structure. She added it after your father died. What does that mean? It means if primary oversight fails, I can validate internal integrity breaches and trigger enforcement clauses. My breath caught. Enforcement clauses. He nodded. Immediate transfer of operational control away from compromised parties. Everything clicked. My grandmother had not just suspected, she had prepared. Quietly, carefully, waiting for the right moment. And now that moment had arrived. By the next morning, formal notices were delivered. Vanessa, my mother, Daniel, all received immediate suspension of any claimed authority pending investigation. Assets frozen. Accounts locked. External review initiated. And most importantly, control shifted. Not to Vanessa, not to my mother. To me, not as a gift, as a consequence of truth. I stood in front of the inn again just like the night of the gala. But this time I was not walking in to fight for space. I was walking in because it was mine to protect. And inside, everything was about to collapse. The collapse was not loud. It was precise. That is what real consequences look like when they are built on evidence instead of emotion. Within days, the investigation expanded beyond the inn itself. The secondary accounts Owen traced were formally linked to shell vendors. Those vendors connected back to holding structures tied to Daniel's professional network. The signature substitution method Marcus exposed aligned exactly with the altered documents Elise had unknowingly confirmed existed. Except now Elise was no longer protected. When confronted, she tried to reposition herself as someone who had been confused and pressured. But digital records told a different story. She had not just accessed the archive. She had modified it. Timestamps did not lie. Neither did access logs. Her betrayal was not a mistake. It was a choice. Daniel lost his composure completely once formal inquiries began reaching his firm. The calm strategist disappeared. In his place was a man trying to control damage that had already moved beyond his reach. His attempts to isolate liability failed quickly once communications surfaced, showing coordination across multiple actions. My mother, she did not fight the same way. She unraveled. Not publicly at first, privately, in meetings, In conversations where she tried to frame everything as protection, as necessity, as doing what had to be done to secure the family's future. But the truth was simpler. She chose one daughter over the other so completely that she justified destroying anything that challenged that choice. And when that structure collapsed, she had nothing left to stand on. Vanessa held on the longest, even after suspension, even after accounts were frozen, even after the investigation made it clear the narrative had shifted. She still believed she could talk her way out. Until the final review session, we were all there. Legal teams, auditors, my grandmother. And for the first time since the gala, no audience to perform for, just truth, laid out, step by step, transaction by transaction, signature by signature. Vanessa tried once more. This was strategic restructuring, she said. Everything was done to preserve the asset. Rebecca responded calmly. Preservation does not involve unauthorized transfers, falsified records, or misrepresentation of consent. Vanessa turned to me then. You destroyed this family. I met her gaze without hesitation. No, I said. You exposed what it really was. Silence. Not heavy this time. Final. Decisions followed quickly after that. Daniel faced formal charges tied to fraud and professional misconduct. His firm distanced itself immediately. The same network he relied on to build his plan abandoned him to protect their own reputations. Elise accepted a reduced role in the proceedings in exchange for full cooperation, but her place in the family was gone. Not because I demanded it, because trust once broken like that does not rebuild itself through apologies. My mother lost everything connected to the inn, not through punishment, through consequence. Authority requires integrity. She had none left. Vanessa, she lost the most. Not just access, not just control, identity. Because for years she had built herself around being the chosen one. And when that illusion shattered, there was nothing underneath strong enough to replace it. As for me, I did not feel victorious in the way people expect. There was no celebration, no moment where everything suddenly felt light. There was something else instead. Peace. Quiet. Earned. The kind that comes when you stop asking people to be who they have already shown they are not. The inn changed after that. Not in appearance, but in atmosphere. Staff moved differently. Conversations felt honest. Decisions felt clean. And for the first time in years, the place actually felt like what my grandmother built it to be. Not a stage, a home, for people who respected it. My grandmother eventually stepped back fully, not because she was forced to, but because she chose to. She trusted me. Not because I was blood, because I proved I would protect what mattered, even when it cost me everything. Marcus stayed on as an advisor. Tessa became more than staff. She became family in a way that had nothing to do with last names. And slowly I built something new. Not just a business, a circle, a chosen family. People who stood beside me because they chose to, not because they were expected to. That matters more than anything blood ever promised. So now I want to ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone just because they were family, even when your instincts told you something was wrong? And when the truth finally came out, did you walk away? Or did you fight for it like I did? If this story made you feel something real, take a second to share your experience in the comments. I read them. I really do. Like this video if you believe truth matters more than comfort. Subscribe if you want more stories where silence gets broken and justice actually shows up. And share this with someone who still believes loyalty should never cost your integrity. Thank you for staying with me through this. And wherever you are right now, I hope you choose truth sooner than I did. Because sometimes that choice changes everything.